up, my Z followers? It's Saturday. Welcome back to the question. We read the questions and I have the answers. And I was gonna say it's Saturday, so I'm still in my pajamas. I have not left my room at all. I did tie-dye though, that's why it looks like I killed somebody. I wasn't gonna do anything important today, but I was scrolling through Instagram, getting my LGBTQ plus validation for the week. And I saw that the queen herself, Yasmin Benoit, had posted something about asexual representation, specifically about the Legends of Tomorrow's portrayal of asexual representation. If you don't know who Yasmin Benoit is, she is, I think, the up and coming leading ace arrow activist. As of 2021, 2022, she is a Black British lingerie model, which skyrocketed her fame and why it's so unique that she's ace arrow. And her main platform is talking about the stigmatization of ace people, both outside of and within the LGBTQ plus community, and that's what she talks about in her post. So this is entirely inspired off of her. You can find her on Instagram, and you should definitely go look at it yourself. But I'm just gonna talk about my opinions on it as an ace arrow person. Yeah. So in the newest season of Legends of Tomorrow, they introduced the character Spooner, who is, I don't know, I haven't been keeping up with the show lately, but she's a human who was kidnapped by aliens when she was a kid and has kind of become that off the grid kind of paranoid person, but also she has alien powers because I think something that the aliens did to her. So she can communicate with aliens and has alien-like tendencies. But in a episode, they had Spooner come out as asexual, which, by the way, that description is a gross misrepresentation of what actually happened in that scene, because yes, she did come out, but it didn't happen the way that phrasing leads it on to mean, and that is what has inspired the criticism by Yasmin Benoit. And reading the post, I had to go back and rewatch that episode and that scene, and she made a lot of points in the post, so let's get on to that. For those of you who don't know, asexuality is the little to no sexual attraction. It's characterized by the lack of sexual attraction, and that's it. It's a very vague, open description. Same thing with aromanticism. It's the lack of romantic attraction, or in some cases, consistent romantic attraction. So that's it. That's the whole thing. That's all you need. And so that creates a very diverse and complex community, because that can show up in very different ways. Like everything, it is a spectrum, and so there are people who are asexual and they don't feel sexual attraction, so they don't have sex. They're just not interested in it because why would they want to do something that they don't have any feeling towards? Some people are ace and arrow, so they don't feel romantic attraction or sexual attraction. Some are asexual and alloromantic, meaning that they don't have sexual attraction, but they have romantic attraction. Some people are aromantic, so they have no romantic attraction, but they have sexual attraction. And then within those communities, there are variations of how that shows up. So they have asexuals, maybe they lack sexual attraction, but they're comfortable having sex, and even enjoy it. And there are people who don't like the idea of sex at all. They think it's gross and they never want to have it. Some people really enjoy having sex and they want to have sex. They just don't feel any sexual attraction to one person. They just like the act of it. Same thing with romantic attraction. Some people don't like the idea of a romantic relationship. Some people do and they enjoy doing romantic things, even if they feel no attraction towards it. Some people, they do feel romantic attraction, but it's only towards specific people in specific instances. Same thing with sexual attraction. Basically, what I'm saying is that there's a wide range of how this shows up, and her main criticism is that aside from a lack of asexual representation in media, specifically TV, is the misrepresentation of the community. And while Spooner is coming out as asexual, which we'll get to how that happened later, so minor spoilers, but it's not related to the larger plot, so not big spoilers, is misrepresentation because it's either portrayed incorrectly or it's portrayed as only being one facet of the community, and not all facets are talked about or celebrated. So in Spooner's case specifically, how it happened is she and Zari are talking about like they're playing fuck, marry, kill basically, and with the people in the group. So basically Zari is being nosy and trying to get tea. And because that's the only reason you play that game. You play that game, you play Truth or Dare, just to get tea from people. Sorry to break it to you, that's the only reason those games are played, because you want to know something specific about a person. So they're playing Fuck, Marry, Kill with people in there. And so first of all, Zari asked like all the men in the group, and Spooner's just like, I'm not really attracted to them. And so Zari's like, okay, what about all the women in the group? And Spooner's like, I'm not really attracted to them either. Which, first of all, was off to me that they were playing fuck, marry, kill, and that she didn't answer to like any of them, because I feel like even most asexuals, whether they know they're ace or not, will clarify that they don't feel like specifically like fucking someone, but they'd still answer marry and kill, especially if they're still allo-romantic. But that's a whole other thing, is that they set it up really oddly, and even then Spooner was like, yeah, no, I'm not really attracted to anyone, so I think that might just be like an alien part of me. Which that whole interaction was kind of awkward for me. But then Zari's like, oh, or you could just be like asexual, which means that you have like little to no interest in sex. And Spooner's like, yeah, no, that might be, I guess I'm asexual. Which, once again, it's a big thing that they have explicit asexual representation on a major show, on a major channel, because, and Yasmin addressed this in her post, is that most of the asexual characters we have now are never explicitly stated to be ace. It's just inferred that way because it's stated that they don't have an interest in sex. And her biggest criticism with that is that asexuality is not a lack of interest in sex, it's a lack of sexual attraction, and it's almost never portrayed that way. And so while Spooner coming out as asexual was great, it was stated by someone who wasn't ace, which is what got me. That bothered me a little bit, a tiny bit, that it was stated by Zari, not by Spooner herself. But it was stated that it was, oh, you have no interest in sex. It's not that you lack sexual attraction, it's that you don't have an interest. And that is a gross misrepresentation of the community, because it's a lack of attraction, not a lack of interest. And many people within the community still find sex interesting and still want to have it and still do have it. And so it creates this like stigma that people who are asexual never have sex. And that's where we get into questions of like, isn't that just celibacy? Like, what's the difference between asexuality and just not having sex? And the difference is a lack of attraction, not a lack of like wanting to do it. And as I said earlier, some asexuals don't want to have sex, but that's not what makes you asexual. Someone's car alarm is going off, so this is a college campus. Someone's car probably got broken into again. Oh, okay, it's gone. Another thing, another thing that Yasmin brought up in her post is that there's also a lack of ace arrow characters. So there's usually like, when someone is being presented as asexual. It's like, oh, they don't want to have sex, but they do want to have a romantic relationship. It's just like, oh, they're not entirely where there's still this one thing that makes them normal in a way, is what it kind of sounds like when they talk about it that way, especially when it's usually stated by someone who isn't asexual, or it's stated like just like that. And that's also what was done here in this instance. If it's like, oh, they don't have sexual, like they don't, you're not interested in sex, but they can still have romantic relationships and find love. And that's all well and good, because there's also on the flip side, a lot of people within the LGBTQ plus community that's like, oh, if you're asexual, you're also aromantic, which isn't true. But it's a weird thing if it's like, from the outside perspective, people like the straight community is like, okay, we have to make, if we're going to present an asexual, we have to make sure people know that they still want to have like find love and get married and all that kind of shit. But then with the LGBTQ plus community, it's like, oh, if you're not attracted to people sexually, you're not attracted to anything at all in any way. Both are harmful narratives, and both should be broken. But the explicit lack of like ace arrow specifically representation is a problem, because it does perpetuate this like hyper romanticization in the media. It places like true love and finding your soulmate and getting married and all that kind of stuff, and romance is like the best possible thing you could have, and that's just not it for everybody. You don't have to be a romantic to feel this way. You could just not want to get married, or not, want this for yourself. Whether you, because it's not about what you do or don't want. It's about how you feel, or what attraction you feel. And if you just don't have romantic attraction, that's different from just not wanting to get married. Because there are a lot of allo people who just don't want to get married. And so so she commented that it's almost like you have to make up for it when they say, oh, you're asexual, but also you can still have this. It's like you're different, but you're not that different. And it's almost like apologizing in a way, like making up for it, and that's kind of shitty. Now, on to good types of asexual representation, which she mentioned, but also which I also agree with. And also, I'm not saying that like you should boycott Legends of Tomorrow, or say that it's bad, or yell at the studio or the actresses or anything, because we should be having more representation, and this wasn't bad. It was just inaccurate, but I guess it's better. I don't want to say it's better to have inaccurate representation than no representation at all. Neither is favorable, but it's like at least we're getting more representation, more explicit representation than just like, oh, you gotta figure it out for yourself. So it's nice to have that, but at the same time, it would be better if it were accurate. But that being said, there are accurate forms of asexual representation, or at least better forms of asexual representation, which can be found on Netflix. I think Legends of Tomorrow can also be found on Netflix, but I know they were taking some of the CW shows off, and I don't know if they took Legends of Tomorrow off either, or how up to date the Netflix series is. I don't know if they have the newest season, which is where this takes place. But I think the overwhelmingly best asexual representation that we had, which was honestly, she was a one-off character, so it sucks that she never came back, that we never explored this more, was Florence in Sex Education. And Sex Education, first of all, is a great show about any kind of sex education, not just like LGBTQ plus stuff, but also just like the anatomy and like sex as a form of like health, and as an action, and as a feeling, and the anatomy of all of this shit. It's just really great and educational to watch, but it also it's funny, and it still retains a good plot line despite the fact that it is educational. And so basically, also there's Gillian Anderson, and she plays like this the sex therapist mom, and she's amazing. Love Gillian Anderson. But she was judging the school's sexual health, like sex education, as she's a sex therapist. And so she's judging the school's sex education. And so she created a little office, and like any student who had a question could come in and ask her. So the character Florence comes in, and she's like, I don't want to have sex, like, ever. I don't feel the need to, and is there something wrong with me? And so Gillian Anderson's character was just like, oh, then you might be asexual. And she said, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's the lack of sexual attraction. Sex just isn't important to some people. Sex just doesn't do it for them. And so Florence said, I still want to fall in love. And she's like, some asexuals do still want to fall in love, you know? And some of them do get married and live out these happy romantic lives just without the sex bit. And then there are also people who are aromantic who don't want either. And so, yeah, it kind of sucked that it was coming from someone who wasn't ace themselves, but also it was like someone who had the authority, you know, and the knowledge about this. And she didn't go in depth as I have about all the different nuances, you know, because it was just like a little blurb about it. And if this resonates with you, you can Google more about it on yourself. And if you have any more questions about asexuality or aromanticism, please, I would love to make more videos on this topic. I love educating people about how I feel attraction and this community that I'm a part of and everything. I love talking about it so much. I don't see it as a burden at all. And it will not be rude of you to ask me any like pervasive questions about it. But it was nice that she talked about, you know, like you could be aromantic or you could be asexual, and one doesn't necessarily mean that you are the other. And also that she stated that it was a lack of attraction, not a lack of interest or want, because as we stated earlier, that's not how it works. So that was one example of pretty good asexual representation, but Florence was not a main character, so it kind of sucked that it never went further than that. But like as for explaining what it was, I think they did it really well. The next bit of representation, which was a main character, so we did get to explore like whole plot lines and season-long storylines with it, was Todd Chavez from BoJack Horseman. We went through his, and his was good because it talked about, once again, that it's the attraction, not the interest. And so how they didn't explicitly state what it was until later, but they were having conversations about like how we felt. And so it was just like he was dating someone, they're like, I feel like we're dating, but we're not dating because you don't want to have sex with me. And he's like, I don't think like I'm attracted to you that way. And she's like, are you gay? And he said, no, I don't think I'm really attracted to anybody that way, you know, but I do like you and I like the time we spend together. And they're like, I think you're asexual. And it showed him, you know, coming to terms with that and discovering for himself what that meant and meeting more asexual people and talking about what that meant, because, you know, he's like, oh, what if I can't get married? I can't be in a relationship because I'm asexual. And they're like, no, you still can, you know, unless you're aromantic and that's just not what you're into. But ace people can have relationships and get married if that's what they want, you know. And so he tried dating other asexual people, and he was like, well, it's hard because the only thing that these people have in common sometimes are their asexuality, and that doesn't make them compatible, but they feel a need to only date other asexuals because of how sexual our society is and how pervasive sex is as like a mindset and a requirement, you know, kind of like a rite of passage that everybody has to go through eventually. You know, but eventually he did find someone else who was asexual that he was really, you know, able to connect with. But they talked a lot about like the nuances and lived experiences of asexuals within a hypersexual society. And that was really nice. Once again, so if you need asexual representation, or you need at least good explanations of what asexuality is, check out those shows because they were really nice to have. But also, other asexual characters aren't bad. Asexuality in media is few and far in between. And as I said, Spooner in Legends of Tomorrow is ace, and that is a huge step forward, and it's great, and it means a lot to a lot of young fans. If you Google up the reactions to the coming out, a lot of asexual fans love it, especially younger ones. They, see themselves like that, and they're like, oh my god, it's like that. And it's really important for young kids to learn about asexuality, because it's not as widely talked about. So it's not something that you realize too, because I didn't realize it until I was like 15, because it's not like you feel something different, it's like you don't feel something, and so you don't realize that everybody else is feeling something that you're not until it's explicitly stated to you. It's not like you look at someone and you're like, hey, maybe I don't like guys, maybe I like girls, or maybe I like both, or maybe I like one or the other, or maybe I feel something different. It's a lack of feeling. And so unless someone explicitly tells you that a feeling is supposed to be there and you're not experiencing it, you're not gonna know. And so it's important to have these characters, whether they are accurate representations of the community or not, just so the knowledge that that is something that you can identify as and that is something that is real and valid is out there, so you don't feel like an outsider your whole life. Because the society that we're in is very hypersexual, and it's easy to feel isolated and left out because you don't understand the appeal to it, you don't resonate with it, and you're just like, why can't I just feel something? And maybe, like Florence said, am I broken? But you're not broken. We just need to get better at showing people the other kind of people that are out there and saying that it's okay. And ultimately, that's what representation is. It's little bits of media saying it's okay for you to occupy this space. And that's why representation is important. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun making it. Once again, as I said earlier in the video, I love talking about asexual things and aromantic things. So please feel free to comment below and ask your questions. I would love to talk more about it on this channel, or just anytime. That being said, be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.